Who are a few of the dumbest criminals who have trouble using their brain? Let's find out, starting with number 7, just advertising. Mark Wainfur thought he was the Tony Montana of his town. He managed to pocket a whopping £230,000 from his little dealing enterprise, but his need for attention was his undoing. You'd think a guy dealing with some criminal activities and finding some measure of success while doing it would know to keep a low profile, right? Like even in your house, because you never know who's going to drop by. Like the police, who actually did drop by. And they found over £14,000 in cash just lying around his place, like spare change under the couch cushions. The police also stumbled upon some designer clothes, jewelry, and Rolex watches. They dug into Mark's phones, and inside they found over 26,000 photos, 400 videos, 700 messages, which is like a lot of people's phones, except it wasn't most people's phones. What was in those messages and photos? You guessed it. Mark showing off like he was starring in his very own gangster movie. He was posing next to stacks of cash big enough to build a castle, strutting his stuff at farms and grow specific plants, you name it. After all the smoke cleared, Mark found himself sentenced to 12 years behind bars. The court also ruled that Mark had to cough up £48,952. So here's the moral of the story. Crime might seem glamorous in the movies, but real life doesn't work that way. If you're gonna tread on the wrong side of the law, maybe don't document your crimes on your phone and flash your ill-gotten wealth. Real question here though. Have you ever looked at someone posing with piles of cash and thought they were awesome? Why do people do this? Number 6. SpellCheck Helps. William Hickson found himself in a pickle when his get-rich-quick scheme took an unexpected turn. Hickson, from Gateshead in the UK, had a stack of counterfeit £20 notes totaling a not-so-small fortune of £820. One day, Hickson got himself into a bit of trouble, unrelated to the funny money, so the police swooped in and conducted a routine search. They stumbled upon his secret stash, 41 of these fake notes tucked away in his sock. You'd think the police would be able to spot fake money a mile away, but instead of relying on their instincts and years of experience, they called in an expert from the Bank of England to confirm. So what ultimately gave away that the money was fake? It wasn't some sophisticated forgery finding technique or a brilliant detective on the case. No, it was that instead of printing £20 on the notes, they opted for the local slang, labeling them as 20 pound. In the courtroom, Hickson owned up to having the counterfeit currency and admitted he would have used it given the chance. His lawyer tried to spin it like Hickson didn't know the money was fake at first, but said that eventually Hickson realized it was. The judge they threw in some rehab and a curfew for good measure. It's weird that the police had to bring in an expert to verify money with spelling errors on it though, right? If you've ever dealt with it, you know pretty quickly that something isn't right about the money, so even a brief examination would give it away. Sounds to us like some certain cops were being a bit lazy. Number 5. Hey, is this you? Brianna Pretty, a waitress, had her wallet and ID stolen weeks before a bizarre incident unfolded that put her ID right back in her hands. Inside her stolen wallet were the usual suspects: money, credit cards, a checkbook, and her driver's license. One day, as Brianna was going about her duties, 4 customers walked in and took their seats. They began ordering drinks, nothing out of the ordinary, until the unthinkable happened. When Brianna asked one of the customers for identification, the young woman handed her an ID. But the ID had something very familiar about it. Brianna found herself staring at her own picture on the driver's license, along with her name and address, because it was hers. But Brianna, keeping her cool, played along. She returned the ID, assuring the thief she'd be back with her margarita. Instead, she made a beeline for the phone and dialed the police. While she waited for the cops to arrive, Brianna kept serving drinks and appetizers, all while suppressing the urge to confront the thief. When the police finally showed up and took the woman into custody and discovered that the thief was apparently 85% moron, about 50% more than average, the woman didn't even need to use Brianna's ID because she was 26 years old at the time and of legal drinking age. Why wouldn't she just use her own ID? Maybe she was planning a dine and dash? But then again, which bartender really remembers names and addresses glancing at the birth date on a license? The woman was charged with theft, identity theft, and criminal impersonation for doing stupid things. As if that that weren't enough, the police found narcotics in her possession, which promised further legal trouble. You would think she'd at least know basic things about the ID, like who is on it, what the birthday and expiration date are, things like that. But then, oh yeah, dumb people gonna dumb. Number 4, easy savings. Karen Berger was accused of shoplifting nearly $1,000 worth of lighting from a Home Depot in Boca Raton, which is totally stupid because she didn't need to steal anything. Berger, who's probably got more money than the average American, lives in a $960,000 house. She decided she wanted to go shopping, so she went to Home Depot and loaded up her cart with fancy lighting fixtures worth almost $1,000. Berger then headed to the self-checkout with her elaborate plan she spent a good 5 minutes coming up with. She scanned and paid for a few cheap moving boxes, but when it came to those pricey lighting fixtures, she conveniently forgot to scan them. She covered all of the angles. Berger ended up walking out with over $750 worth of unpaid merchandise, but she was caught on camera because, wouldn't you know it, the self-checkout has cameras everywhere to stop people from stealing. Home Depot's loss prevention squad was right on the case, and they caught her before she could make a getaway. Home Depot decided to press charges for retail grand theft, and Berger found herself in some serious trouble. She was arrested, and almost like it was for funsies, her bond was a cool $1,000, more than the value of the stuff she tried to swipe. If only she lived in a state with a higher minimum for shoplifting charges. It's always a little weird to hear about wealthy people shoplifting. It's like they're so bored with all the money they have that they have to do something to spice things up. So they try a little petty larceny. And how about that loss prevention squad? Was some dude just sitting there watching the self-checkout cameras for hours? There was probably a good chance that had the person been doing anything other than watching her, she would have gotten away with it. Do you work in loss prevention? Shout out in the comments if you have any insight. Number 3, the good old 1099. Once a star of the hit reality show Dance Moms, Abby Lee Miller found herself in a dance of her own with the legal system, and it's a performance she'd rather forget. Miller is known for her tough love approach to teaching aspiring young dancers. She faced a judge in Pittsburgh who doled out some tough love of his own. Miller was sentenced to 366 days in federal prison over fraud charges. Abby Lee Miller was living the dream, or so it seemed. She was the star of the hit reality show Dance Moms, where she molded young, aspiring dancers into stars. But behind the scenes, something wasn't quite right. She had raked in a nice $755,000 from her TV show and other projects, but she decided to play hide and seek with Uncle Sam. She didn't disclose all that dough to the US government, and that's where her dance with the law began. Did she think that TLC wasn't going to report that payout to the government? Abby Lee Miller ended up pleading guilty to bankruptcy fraud. She owned up to her financial missteps that led her to the courtroom in Pittsburgh, sobbing and begging for mercy. It was a far cry from the tough-as-nails dance instructor we all knew. In a heartfelt interview, Abby poured her heart out. She swore she never meant to hurt anyone, and if she knew the trouble filing for bankruptcy would cause, she'd steer clear. But despite her tearful plea, the judge wasn't swayed. Abby Lee Miller was sentenced to 366 days in federal prison. But Abby, always the drama queen, treated her time in the slammer like shooting a movie. She said she would pretend she was on location for 10 months, and she mentioned she had big plans like reading, learning Spanish, and even writing a book. After all, productivity and prison both start with P. After Miller's release, she'll be on supervised release for 2 more years and has to cough up $160,000 in fines. What makes this whole thing totally ridiculous is that Abby Lee Miller is no ordinary citizen. She's a celebrity. A low-level one, but still, she's known. Hiding her earnings from the show like TLC wasn't going to do everything above board was like trying to hide an elephant in a room of penguins. Number 2, deep undercover. Maryland cop Francesco Marlette got himself suspended after getting into a questionable position with a woman in the back seat of his squad car. Francesco had a questionable past, and he had already previously been suspended. Less than 10 years later, he'd forgotten any lessons he learned, and he was back in the headlines for a whole new level of stupidity. Francesco was in broad daylight, wearing his uniform, and was seen locked in a passionate embrace with a scantily clad woman who was not his wife. But instead of keeping a low profile, our naughty officer Francesco decided to take her to the back of his squad car. We don't think he was interrogating her either. Or maybe he was. Who knows with how things are these days. We haven't been interrogated recently, but that modern interrogation technique seems inappropriate. It wasn't like he was parked in some hidden alley either. He was doing all this out in the open, where anyone could see. Obviously, since everyone has seen it. Apparently there were cameras all over the place, and a video taken by some dude ended up going viral. As Francesco and his lady friend disappeared into the back of the police car, people nearby were speaking in Spanish. One person even called him an animal. Kids were also playing nearby, and it's a scene straight out of a reality TV show. Now we're left with more questions than answers. Who is this woman? And what on earth possessed Francesco to do this while on the job? In a public place, with cameras everywhere. Literally, everyone is now walking around with a camera on them, so why would he think this wouldn't get noticed? If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right here for our past release for rappers who couldn't avoid doing the dumbest crimes. Number 1. Running into the long arms of the law. Serial shoplifter Kirk Wharton managed to run straight into the arms of the police while attempting to evade capture during one of his crime sprees. Wharton's daring escapade came to a halt when he collided with police officers, ultimately leading to his arrest. Kirk decided it was the perfect time to hit up a cozy grocery store in Sherwood in the UK. But here's the thing. The police were already onto him because they were investigating a string of recent heists that Kirk had been doing. As Kirk gradually browsed the store's shelves, an officer snuck in to check the CCTV footage. Just when Kirk thought he was in the clear, the shop staff dropped the bombshell. He'd been spotted. Our quick-thinking officer signaled her colleagues waiting outside in an unmarked police car. They were ready to pounce. The officer approached Kirk to make the arrest, but Kirk, fueled by desperation and his insatiable appetite for stolen goods, decided it was now or never. He made a dash for the exit, hoping for a dramatic escape like in the movies. But instead of running away to freedom, he ran straight into more officers who were standing at the front door. And we mean literally. With Kirk's criminal journey abruptly halted by the epic collision with the law, he was left with no choice. In court, he pleaded guilty to all 26 counts against him for the 2,250 pounds worth of stolen goods. The judge, clearly unimpressed by Kirk's capers, gave him 22 weeks behind bars.
Here are a few rappers who love doing crime. Number 8. Spot 'em Got 'em. Rapper Spot 'em Got 'em released a viral song in 2020 called Beatbox. The song caught plenty of people's attention and gained some new listeners. In early June 2020, Spot 'em found himself in a car full of friends. They must have been having a party because when they saw a gate blocking their way, they just ran it over. This gate blocked the entrance to a parking garage that the group was trying to get into. When someone approached the group about what they had just done, Spot 'em pulled out a semi-automatic weapon. He and his friends fled the scene after the incident, and nothing seemed to come of it at first. The young rapper felt like he'd gotten away with everything. He still seemed real comfortable when the cops found him on July 15th, asleep in his bed with a Draco, an AK-47 pistol that he wasn't supposed to have. They arrested him with the help of a warrant that was issued after the parking garage incident. Spot 'em was charged with multiple crimes, including aggravated assault with a firearm, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and accessory after the fact to a felony. After reviewing the case, a judge set his bond at a little over $18,000. Number 7. Pop Out Boys. The amateur rap group Pop Out Boys tried to make it big and live the infamous lifestyle of the rappers they idolized. However, they felt like no one would take them seriously unless they could flash the cash like everyone else. The boys came up with a credit card scam to get rich quickly and remedy this issue. They started buying stolen identities off the dark web. With new identities in hand, they embarked on a shopping spree at some of the most prestigious stores in New York. The operation itself was sort of sophisticated. During the raid on the Pop-Out Boys and their associates' homes, the authorities found a whole horde of equipment related to fraudulently creating credit cards. These items included a card printer, a tipper, a card encoder, and multiple embossers. Classic police work like this built and sold the case for the authorities. They conducted raids and collected videos to make their case invincible. They had already been investigating the Pop-Out Boys for months beforehand. The boys didn't help their own case by rapping about it. Using over 2,000 stolen cards, the group purchased around $250,000 worth of items from places like Barney's at Saks. The group was charged with grand larceny and a lot of credit card fraud. They even earned the Donkey of the Day moniker from Charlemagne the God on Breakfast Club. Charlemagne gives the title to anyone who has made a complete fool of themselves. The Pop-Out Boys fit that description. Number 6. Game Over Reedy. Rena Oliver, better known by her rap name, Game Over Reedy, found herself in a bit of trouble in 2019 when Child Protective Services came knocking. Reedy, who reported feeling unwell, decided to send her kid to school alone in a Lyft. The driver later stated to police that he told her he couldn't take the child by themselves. However, Reedy reportedly went back into her home and didn't return. This prompted the driver to take the kid to the nearest sheriff's office to wash his hands of the issue. At this point, things moved rather quickly, and Reedy was arrested on charges of child endangerment. In Louisiana, this is considered a misdemeanor and carries around a 6-month sentence. This was not her only problem, though. Upon further investigation, the authorities found 2 warrants for outstanding traffic violations on Reedy. Reedy is another honored recipient of the coveted Donkey of the Day moniker given out by the Breakfast Club in the episode Leave Your Kid for the D Challenge. The name references what Reedy originally got famous for. She started an online challenge called For the D that had celebrities like Cardi B joining in. She called herself a trendsetter for it. Thankfully, the Abandon Your Kid in a Lyft challenge never caught on. Between the controversy, the warrants, and everyone clowning her, it seems like it's game over for Reedy. Number 5. Pavi Award. Pavi Award is a rapper from Manchester, UK. In 2020, the artist found herself at the Piccadilly station in Manchester. The staff observed that she was too intoxicated to travel and had the authorities approach Ward and ask her to move along. Ward didn't take too kindly to that. She began cursing and shouting at the staff and officers. She also broke social distancing rules that were in place by getting closer than 6 feet. The officers had no choice but to remove her by force. When they attempted to escort her outside, she resisted them by struggling and even dropping her weight to make it more difficult. Once they got her out, she went straight back into the station. The officers tried to detain her again, but she was able to slip her handcuffs and yank at her own hair. During the complicated, if not a bit funny altercation, one of the officers got bit by the wasted rapper. They'd already charged her with being drunk and disorderly, but her bold act of defiance could have added assaulting an officer to the list. When asked about her side of the story, Ward claimed that she did everything in self-defense and never did anything wrong. In this modern day, the truth was body cam footage away. The officer's footage showed that everything the staff and authorities said Ward did was true. Number 4. Yasin. Yasin is a rapper in Sweden who took the scene by storm when he first popped up. He has thousands of people listening to his music every month. However, this isn't to say that he is without controversy. Like many other rappers, Yasin is no stranger to the grittier side of life. He was arrested many times over his young life. Yasin had multiple drug-related offenses in 2015. He was also convicted on gun charges in 2018 and sentenced to 2 years and 3 months behind bars. Police also questioned him about the suspicious passing of his friend. So it was no surprise when the young rapper was once again arrested in connection with another crime in 2020. One of Yasin's rivals, a rapper named Ina, was kidnapped and beaten. During his time with the kidnappers, they took embarrassing photos of him. They used these to try to blackmail Ina, but he didn't pay up, and the images were released. Upon investigation, the police discovered that the crime was committed by a criminal organization named the Varbin Network. As they dug deeper, the authorities connected them with other crimes as well, and before too long, arrests were being made left and right. Shihab Lamori was arrested and charged with leading the criminal network. He got over 17 years for his involvement. Another rival of Yasin's, known as Haval, was given 2 years and a few months for luring the kidnapping victim to the location where he was captured. Yasin got sentenced to 10 months for passing on instructions concerning the crime. Number 3. Stitches. Philip Nicholas Katsabanis is better known by his rap name, Stitches. He got his name due to a unique tattoo that makes his mouth look like it's stitched together. He also has some other tattoos that make him pretty recognizable. His one-of-a-kind look turned around and bit him in the behind when an officer recognized him. He was parked in a handicapped zone, enough reason for cops to approach his car. The officers knew he was liable to have a gun, but he responded with no when asked. He also handed the cops an already burnt joint and apologized for having it. This gave them probable cause to search the vehicle, and they found his secret stash. There were almost 40 grams of marijuana under his seat, and a handgun, and 2 magazines. When asked why he lied about the gun, the young man said he misunderstood the question and thought they were asking if he had one on his person. They charged the husband and father of 3 with possession of a firearm and drugs. Number 2. Nuke Bizzle. Nuke Bizzle, or as his mother knows him, Fontrell Antonio Baines, committed multiple crimes in his pursuit of a rapper's glamorous lifestyle. On September 10, 2020, Mr. Bizzle put out a music video on YouTube called EDD. The video was about getting money and seemed to fit right into the genre. The young rapper claimed that he didn't have to grind hard for his money and instead figured out how to take it from the government. He says in his song that other artists have to sell drugs while he just has to file a claim. Later in his trial, this line was directly referenced as evidence of his crimes. He stole over $1 million from the California Employment Development Department, otherwise known as EDD. How did Nuke scam so much money in such a short amount of time? Well, he scammed relief funds meant for people struggling financially through the COVID-19 pandemic. The payouts came in the form of prepaid debit cards in the mail. The rapper used stolen identities to obtain almost 100 cards and spent them on everything under the sun. He purchased merchandise, different services, and straight up withdrew the money. Mr. Bizzle and his entourage were funding their flashy lifestyle with benefits that belong to other people. They might have gotten away with it too, if not for that pesky music video. However, like some real-life version of the famous Key and Peele sketch, he ratted himself out in the song. Bizzle was arrested on September 23, 2020, while partying in Las Vegas with his ill-gotten gains. He was charged with 3 felonies, including access device fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, and aggravated identity theft. If Mr. Bizzle is found guilty on all counts, he could end up spending the next 22 years of his life behind bars. It seems like bragging about scheming the government wasn't Bizzle's best bet. Meanwhile, that's only the tip of the Nuke Bizzle iceberg. Click here for the full video on Nuke Bizzle. Number 1. C Blue. Rapper C Blue, or Cameron Williams, wears many hats. The young man was an up-and-coming rapper and well-known Crip member. He's also a criminal with gun possession charges. In January of 2022, he added assault to his rap sheet. On January 18th, officers responded to a call about Mr. Blue causing a disturbance. They approached the young man and ordered him to remove his hands from his pockets. When he didn't comply, the cops struggled with him. During the ensuing fight, a gun went off and, in a Cheddar Bob-like moment, hit one of the officers and C Blue himself. At this point, both people were rushed to the hospital and were ultimately okay. The wounded officer left the hospital to the cheers of his partners, while Blue went straight to jail without passing go. He was already on probation for gun possession charges from 2020, yet his lawyer somehow managed to get bail set, even when the prosecution wanted Blue to stay in jail. He posted the $250,000 bail and left the same night he went in. This added to an already growing controversy surrounding Judge Dennis Boyle, who has apparently allowed several violent offenders to walk in New York.
Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section whether or not the incidents of petty crimes have actually gone up around you in real life.